Ladies and gentlemen, and other people who are not ladies or gentlemen, we are back with another episode of Music That Matters. I am your host, Wes, here for Different Strings, a guitar podcast. And with me, as always, is the other host. I don't even call you a co-host because we are truly equals.
We're just hosts.
We are hosts, Andrew, and Andrew always starts every episode, whether it's a Music That Matters or a regular episode, with telling people how to find us on the internet so they can engage with us. And he's going to do that right now.
Okay, go to onlyfans.com/different strings podcast.
No, don't click that link. Don't click that link.
Oh, all right. Go to the other website we have, which is differentstringspodcast.com, where you'll find G-rated material, maybe PG, occasionally R-rated.
We drop F-bombs.
Okay, so occasionally R-rated. Gear reviews should be coming, and blog posts about things that inspire us, and links to past episodes and all kinds of goodies.
Yeah. And if you're a gear company, send us stuff. We'll review it. We promise.
Our website is lacking, and I have to get on our webmaster.
Yeah. Get on that, Andrew.
Oh, damn it. All right.
Well, I need to do some gear reviews too, but that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. Tonight, we're here to talk about music that matters.
And what an episode it is, my friends. Oh, it's a good one.
I have chosen, it's my turn to choose, and I chose what is literally one of my all-time favorite albums, and absolutely my favorite album that came out way long ago in 1985. And it is from a British band with a surprisingly American name called the Outfield. And it is their debut album called Play Deep. Now,
debut album.
And I'm going to say right off the bat, you should actually be listening to the Outfield's first 3 albums. Right? But we're going to focus on what I consider to be a pop gem of a pop salvo across the bow of hair metal. And that is absolutely Play Deep. And the standard disclaimer applies. It's a banger and every tune slaps. Well, I like literally every song. All right. So, but now let's go into the Wayback Machine, Andrew, and let me set the picture for people who might not have been alive in 1985 and might not remember. Right. In 1985, I was 15 and turned 16. Right. At the height of my musical joy. I was a fresh guitar player. I started playing guitar when I was about 15.
Yep.
So I went back and I looked up what the albums that hit number 1 on the Billboard charts were in 1985. It started with Prince's Purple Rain. That stayed up there for a couple of months. Then
no guitar slouch, mind you. That's an album we might need to be talking about soon.
We might have Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen.
Wow, that was a great.
Who is also not a slouch on the guitar. Like a Virgin from Madonna, and she is a slouch on the guitar, but she is an excellent pop songwriter, and back then she was at the height of her powers. And then Make It Big, which was the other big British band of the year. Wham! Exclamation point.
George Michael.
Yeah. Dude, and that was the album that had Wake Me Up Before You Go and Careless Whisper, 2 of their biggest hits.
Dude, think 85 was a year.
It was. But
Prince,
wait,
Madonna,
there's more.
Bruce Springsteen and Wham. I mean, that's just, there's more?
Yeah, there's more. The album that stayed at number 1 the longest in 1985 was Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms.
Oh, man.
Right? And that's the
album.
Yeah. That's the album that has the unedited and now problematic version of I Want My MTV. No, of Money for Nothing. Right? The song that Mark Knopfler wrote it, but Sting got a songwriting credit because he used the vocal melody from Don't Stand So Close to Me to sing I Want My MTV. And I want to note now, Don't Stand So Close to Me was also a lyrically problematic song.
Yeah.
And that's what brings us full circle to Play Deep.
Okay.
All right. But there's a little, I got to tell you a little bit more, because in the hair metal world, which is where I lived
Yeah,
and
me too.
breathed,
Yep.
and excuse me now, we have to apparently call this, it's been retconned. We have to call it glam metal.
What?
We can't call it hair metal anymore, right?
Why?
I don't know. Because they don't like being referred to as hair metal bands, I guess. But 1985 was an absolute banner year in hard rock and heavy metal.
Okay, bring it.
Dokken, Under Lock and Key,
Killer.
Rat, Invasion of Your Privacy,
Killer.
Kiss, Asylum, which is the only Kiss album I like, and I love it. Bruce Kulick, fantastic guitar player.
No Ace Frehley on that one.
Motley Crue, Theater of Pain,
Mm-hmm.
Bon Jovi, 7,800 Degrees Fahrenheit, Night Ranger, Seven Wishes.
Jesus.
But these are all glam metal bands, right? Hair metal bands.
Uh-huh.
Let's talk about the heavy stuff. Megadeth, Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good.
Wow, their first album,
Yeah.
1985.
85. Iron Maiden released literally the best double live album ever recorded in the history of music, Live After Death.
Pretty good, man.
Stryper put out Soldiers Under Command. And before you protest, I'm going to say, yes, I put Stryper with the heavier stuff because back then they looked glam, but they sounded heavy except for the ballads.
Okay.
Corrosion of Conformity, Animosity.
That came out in 85.
85.
No way.
Trouble had The Skull, Anthrax had Spreading the Disease, and Slayer put out Hell Awaits. This is all 1985. And what I'm saying here is there was a lot of great music to choose from in 1985.
Yeah.
And I listened to Play Deep more than all of those other albums.
Huh.
And I eventually got all of those other albums, and I still listen to them in 2024, except, of course, Motley Crue, because I don't like Motley Crue, and I never will. And there's even less of a chance of that now that they treat Mick Mars like absolute crap.
Preach.
But I still listen to Play Deep more. That's how much I love this album, right?
Mm.
So the big hit from Play Deep, and really you could legitimately call the Outfield a one-hit wonder based on the popularity of this song, which was far and above all of their other singles.
Mm-hmm.
Although to me, I do not consider them a one-hit wonder. And that song was Your Love, which came out on the radio, blew people away. And in the song, the protagonist's girlfriend is away on a vacation, and the singer, well, maybe he's telling the story about a friend, is trying to get another and apparently underage woman to have sex with him. So it's clear that he's only interested in a one-night stand. He keeps reminding himself that he, quote, likes his girls a little bit older, but he's willing to slum it with this youngster.
Oh boy.
And you do have to keep in mind, this was a different time. In 1985, it was still okay in rock and roll to sing about having sex with underage girls. It's no longer the case. So don't judge, but don't forget, it's not okay to have sex with underage girls if you're over 18 and in a rock band. You might think it's cool, but it's creepy. And depending on the age difference and the state you're in or the country, it might just be illegal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I digress.
But you digress.
I do digress.
That's a long. It is a little cringy when you hear lyrics about, Kip Winger has entered the room. She's only 17.
Yeah, Kip Winger laughs and she's only 17.
Yeah.
So, but the thing that carries Your Love and the whole album is the high tenor voice of singer and bass player Tony Lewis.
Yeah, and honestly, the
phenomenal singing voice.
Harmonies on that record are just outstanding.
Just amazing, right? Tony was well known for playing headless basses, mostly Steinbergers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And then, yeah, you mentioned the vocal harmonies are just amazing. And that comes from the near perfect guitar player, John Spinks.
Yeah, an underrated guitar player, if there ever was one.
Yeah. And Tony and John wrote all the songs, either together or individually. And rounding out the band, power trio, they only had one other person, was a drummer called Alan Jackman. And from what I remember, he didn't sing. I saw them several times and
Okay.
I don't remember him singing. So Your Love got up to number 6 on the charts. Play Deep sold triple platinum. That's 3 million, over 3 million copies just in the United States.
Hmm.
And the vast majority of the songs are radio friendly, upbeat, pop leaning rock tunes,
Hmm.
lyrics that deal with romantic relationships in their various stages, getting started, in the middle, at the end, whatever. There's 2 phenomenal ballads on the album, one called Every Time You Cry and another called Nervous Alibi. And if the protagonist's descent into loneliness and paranoia brought on by his terrible jealousy in Nervous Alibi doesn't make you cry just a tiny little bit, you're probably dead inside. It's that moving. It's the album closer. It's the perfect album closer. It's such a beautiful song. So the 2 songs on the album that are not about relationships in any way, shape, or form, as a song called 61 Seconds, which is about being late to work and what a pain in the ass your boss can be about it. Uh, and the song right after that on
Uh-huh.
the album, which is called Mystery Man, which is basically a spy novel that lasts about 4 minutes and 4 seconds.
Oh, nice.
It's really fantastic song. And
Hmm.
and like I said, literally no bad songs on this. I'll put it right up there with Brian Adams' Reckless, which I've talked about on this show
Yep.
before.
Yep.
Now, obviously, Brian Adams' songs got a lot more attention, and that album had way more singles than Play Deep, but that's because of the record company,
Mm.
right? The record company was not behind a debut album from a obscure British power trio the way Brian's record label was behind his album.
Which is a
He was already
shame.
an established
This
artist.
this album, for a debut album, forget it. I mean, it's near perfect production.
It
Every
absolutely.
song is incredible, and I know we haven't gotten to guitar yet, but I got to be honest, man. One of the most iconic guitar tones I have ever heard.
Yeah, because it's so, like I said, it's radio friendly. It sounds great, great, great on the radio.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, let's talk about the guitars. Now, like I said, I got to see the Outfield a couple of times. Once they opened for Starship and once they opened for Journey. So yes, I went to those shows.
Hmm.
But honestly, I only went to see the Starship show because the Outfield was opening. I like Journey, so I went to that show for the package. John played several different guitars. At the time, he was mostly using a Schecter Telecaster copy
Yep.
that had 2 humbuckers in it.
Yep.
But he also used an ES335 a lot.
Hmm.
And from what I remember reading, he used a standard, you know, early 80s Fender Telecaster in the studio, especially on Your Love,
Yep.
that was recorded with his basic Telecaster.
Yep.
So there you go. One of my all-time favorite songwriters, and he relied on a telly in the
Hmm.
studio.
Yep.
Right now, I couldn't find any information on what he used for amps in the 80s, but I remember seeing Marshall half stacks on stage. That doesn't mean he was using them, but
Yeah.
you
Yeah, there
know,
was many years ago, I came across a forum post. I want to say Gear Sluts or one of those
yeah,
non-gear pages, and the actual producer or guy behind the board on that album did a long like write up of what went on in the studio gear wise. And I do
right.
recall not only did John use that Telecaster, he confirmed that, but he also confirmed that he used a Marshall JCM 800.
Yeah, which was a go-to amp at that point. I mean, and still, I mean, one of the greatest amps that Marshall ever put out.
But what, and no argument, but what was surprising to me is when you listen to that album and you hear those tones, those in between, like edge of breakup, heavily processed, crystal clear, like you would think, oh, he must have been using a Fender amp, must have been using
Yeah,
a Fender amp.
or
Nope.
a jazz chorus or something.
Something, but nope, he confirmed it was an JCM. It was compressed on the way in, there was compression on the way out, there was
Yep.
all sorts of effects before, there was effects after, it was all, so it wasn't like the least processed tone in the world, but when you listen to that record, I'm sorry, one of the most identifiable 80s guitar tones that I've ever heard. And as someone, as a guitar player who's had to play this song in a band,
Yeah.
very hard to emulate if you don't know the recipe for it.
Yeah, because the tendency is to go too much gain.
One of the tendencies is to go too much gain. Another tendency is to go towards like a Fender amp or a solid state amp.
Yeah.
And once I read that post, I said, "Oh, now I think I know what I'm going for." And it gets easier to emulate that tone once you do that. But
Yeah.
still, one of the most iconic guitar tones. And he uses that tone almost the entire album, and it never. I'm sorry, it just never gets old. It
No,
sounds
yeah,
fantastic.
absolutely fantastic. Tony used a Steinberger XL2. That's
Mhm.
the one with the tiny little body.
Yep, the
And he used that
shoebox.
in the video for Your Love, which
Mhm.
doesn't mean anything, just means that he had one. But he was also regularly photographed at the time with headless basses that had a full size body. So I guess, he give him the tiny one to look pretty in the video, but he wants to play one with a full size body. I have no idea what he used for amps. Nobody really paid attention to bass amps in the 80s. It was probably an Ampeg, you know. He didn't have a particularly gritty sound. Believe it or not, an SVT can have a perfectly clean bass sound.
Mhm.
So gear wise, not a ton of information, but great tones.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they never had a number one hit. They never even had a number one album. But the Outfield's music was a constant throughout their career. Even the albums that you never heard a single song from, right? They sound like the Outfield their whole time. That's what they sound like. They followed up Play Deep with an album called Bangin', which was also produced by the same guy that did Play Deep. It's called William Whitman. It pretty much sounds exactly like the first album and is also filled with fantastic songs,
Right.
right? And I would say out of the 10 songs on that, 9 of them are fantastic.
Mhm.
Their third album is called Voices of Babylon, and they went with a new producer, a guy called David Kahn. And that guy also played some keyboards on the album to add a little bit of texture. The title track, the song Voices of Babylon, was their highest charting song, hit number 2 on the mainstream rock chart,
Mhm.
which it played out to about number 25 on the Hot 100. That's the big chart.
Okay.
So, and after that, of course, they never had another single that charted. Their albums didn't do good, and they went off into obscurity because by then it was almost the next album they put out was during grunge, and they weren't dead. It was, you know, precisely crafted pop rock songs, but people that listened to grunge music were not listening to that stuff, and it's
Mm.
unfortunate. They had a couple more good albums after that. Not great, not like the first 3, which are just awesome. Um, Now, unfortunately, both John and Tony have died. John
Yeah.
got liver cancer and he died in 2014, which was 3 years after they released their last album, which was called Replay. And most of their, um, so he was their primary songwriter. And so when he passed, that was kind of it. Alan came back and played drums on that last album. And that was the end of the band. And now Alan plays with Albert Lee and has done so for a couple of decades, a monster guitar player.
Mhm.
Tony kept up with his solo career. John never had a solo career. He stuck with the band and then he died. Tony released a couple of albums and he wrote those songs with his wife of 35 years, Carol. She was apparently a brilliant lyricist. So when you hear Tony Lewis's solo stuff, his wife wrote most of those lyrics.
Okay.
Um, and he put out an album right before he died in 2020. Um, and his last album was called Out of the Darkness. It's really good. And we don't know why he died. His management said it was sudden and unexpected, and it happened at his home. So I'm guessing stroke or heart attack.
Yeah.
Not unheard of in a guy who's 62 years old and lived a rock and roll lifestyle. Um, so my advice is to get a copy of Play Deep or pull it up on your streaming service and just turn it up as far as you can. And I continue to say it's my favorite album from 1985, hands down. and I will put Play Deep up against anything that else that came out in that year, especially in terms of songwriting, performance, especially the vocal harmonies, guitar tones, overall production. From my seat, it's as close to a perfect album as you can get without being thought of as a legendary part of rock music history.
Yeah,
It's just an absolutely stunning piece of music.
it really is. It's one of the greatest pop rock or power pop albums. It's just, and actually, I think so. Is this a safe place? This is a safe space, isn't
Absolutely
it?
100% safe, especially if we're talking about the outfield.
I discovered the Outfield very late in life. So I was one of those ignorants who only knew the song Your Love. In fact, I only knew the song and didn't know who did it. I just went my whole
Wow.
life knowing the song. It was an iconic song, loved the song, and never listened to the band. And I don't know how many years ago it was, um, and I don't know why. I actually think it might have been at my son's um, prompting, but I wound up finally some years ago listening to the entire record start to finish and kicked myself hard for
Yeah.
not having known about this all along. I
Yeah.
mean, now, so, it's great. Like the streaming services have given us the ability to like hear things that we never had a chance. And I'm really glad that I finally got on board with this. But now that I've listened to the album a million times, Your Love is not my favorite song. There's
No.
so many there. I'm not saying I don't love it, but now I love the whole album. It's equal. The whole album is just fantastic. And I'm
Yeah.
so glad I listened to it because like I said, it's iconic. The tones are amazing. I love the harmonies. It's absolutely one you should be cranking up in the car and singing along to. It's just fun. And yeah, and then it made me want to listen to all of their stuff, which of course you're right. It's it's them. Like they always sound like them, which is a good thing.
Yeah. My two favorite songs on the album are the opener, Say It Isn't So,
Mm-hmm.
and a deep track called Taking All My Chances.
Mm-hmm.
And John, if I remember correctly, John sings the lead on Taking My Chances.
Okay.
And so it's really, he has a much more um I don't want to say monotone, but he has a more middle of the road tenor voice.
Okay.
But when John and Tony start singing together, the first thing I think of is the guys in Alice in Chains with that close harmony. And
Mm-hmm.
where Alice in Chains does it and it sounds haunting, the outfield does it and it sounds angelic.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Yeah.
that same kind of close harmony, and it's just so effective.
Yeah, they really do have. It's one of the. It's a power trio who has great harmonies and great guitar playing. Dare I say, King's X reminds me of the same thing. Like power
Yeah.
trio, great harmonies, great guitar. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm.
And the outfield is just not, has no prog leanings and doesn't play a lot of technical music like King's
Nope.
X does.
Nope.
But, two just utterly fantastic bands for almost exactly the same reasons.
Yeah. They just have a fun. It's just a really interesting, clean. Like I don't know how to describe it. I would. There's so much to like about their sound. Those albums. It's unabashedly 80s. The
Yeah.
snare drum, just the
The
amount of
gated
reverb.
reverb.
Yeah, like it's just. But there's something so I don't know. There's just something that pops in those records.
It's
You know,
mac and cheese, man. It's comfort music.
yeah. It's when I was so glad when you picked this record because I've been listening to it almost nonstop for the last several years, and
I'm so glad.
it's so great. It is so great. If you would have told me about this album 10 years ago, I would have laughed and said I don't listen to stuff by those types of bands, and
Yeah.
I'll give it a listen. But now you mentioned it, and it's just I love this record so much.
And I looked for this thing that I have, but it's got to be buried in a box somewhere. When I went to see the outfield the first time, it was at an amusement park called King's Dominion. They were opening up for Starship. They played for 45 minutes. But my buddy Eric and I got out a sheet and we painted it to look like the cover of Play Deep. And we held that up at the concert. We had so much fun. And I kept that sheet all these years. And now it's folded up in a box somewhere,
That's cool, man.
forever. If I ever have a garage, I'm going to hang it from the ceiling just to be able to look at it and remember, my best friend and my favorite band from 1985 on
Oh,
tour having a good time. It was
that's
really,
awesome.
yeah. And just such a fantastic album and a fantastic band. Thanks. I know some of the choices I make are weird. This one might have been unexpected, but it wasn't weird.
No, not weird. I'm again, it's a great pick. It's a great album. So folks, if you leave in the comments, if you're watching on YouTube, leave in the comments. Do you like this album? Do you not like this album? What do you think of this album? Do you know what John Spinks, what all those effects were? Tell us what he was using. And just a great pick. Thank you, Wes. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
If guys, if you aren't listening to this record, do yourself a favor, go listen to the record. I'm going to put a link in the description.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I'll say we'll close it there unless you got anything else to add.
Differentstrings.com. I'm sorry, differentstringspodcast.com. Please and thank you.
Absolutely.
That's all I got.
That me too.
Peace, everyone.